let's get into the meat of the matter. Um, I wanted to bring, I love talking to Laura, but I wanted to bring her on in particular to get her take on the UK election now that it's been, when was it? It was July 4th. It's been like 6 weeks now, maybe 7 weeks
Yeah, it
since the
was, wasn't
election.
it?
Because I needed to give time for
Yeah.
Laura to mourn and to get over, because she was in the thick of it. She was a candidate, Nick Dury, for the
Yeah.
Alba Party. Alba, is it Alba? I don't want to say ABBA.
Albert, yeah.
So she was in the thick of it, and unfortunately, he was not successful. So I wanted to, which I can imagine that you need some time to you need some time to deal with that. But now she's here to give us her take on the UK election in general, but in specific
We
about
have
the
not been
Scottish
licking
vote.
our wounds.
Yeah, the Scottish vote, and what's going on. What, if anything, this means for the Scottish independence movement, how the vote panned out, and also related to this is the ongoing housing crisis and the politics thereof in Scotland. So we'll see how far we get before she says, "Okay, I've had it." Um, but first of all, I should say that Laura Jones, in addition to being a fantastic lady, is to use the parlance of our time, she identifies as a radical feminist. She's also an international socialist, and she is a homeless. She campaigns for housing, for public housing, and advocates for the homeless in Scotland. And she is for Scottish independence. So on that note, I had this map. I don't know if this helps at all, but I had this map of the vote. And so I'll just turn over to you. How would you kind of like in a nut? What would be your So tell us what your take is about what meaning you take from the UK election in general, in particular this how Scotland voted.
Yeah. Um, so in terms of the UK election more generally, I don't know. I'm so sick of our our politics being determined by English politics that there's this kind of temptation to just ignore it to an extent because it's a different country and we want to get on with our own country. But obviously, our fates are inextricably tied to theirs, so you kind of have to. I mean, we have a Labour government now in the UK, but Keir Starmer's. I mean, there's a lot of young people around that are moaning that Labour is no longer the party of working people, and for a lot of them, I'm like, you weren't alive. You had, you wouldn't be born for another 10 years or whatever. The last time that Labour actually, represented working people, they got rid of Clause 4 in like 97 or something. They've never, in my lifetime, been a party that stands up for working people. But anyway, people keep having this idea that they're reformable, that Labour can be reformed. And I mean, we tried that. Corbyn was ousted and crushed. Despite all these young people joining the Labour Party and trying to turn it to the left, it could not be reformed. But anyway, people still have hope.
Yeah, that dream doesn't want to die. We have the
Scottish
same thing.
People didn't come out in droves to vote Labour. That's not what happened.
Sorry. So I know I just wanted to say that I just wanted to highlight what you said, that there's a lot of dreams or ideologies that we really need to disabuse ourselves of. And I think is to accept that what happened to accept that Labour is no longer, and hasn't been for a long time, primarily a party for working people. That people have to let go. They still think that somehow if Jeremy Corbyn gets, they still, and I don't have anything except for him like being stupid on the trans issue. I have nothing but good feelings for Jeremy Corbyn, but that didn't work out for whatever reason. And yeah, he got smeared as being an anti-Semite, and it was all whatever. But what happened. Now it's Keir Starmer's party. Deal with it. Let it be. Got to do something else. And it's the same thing over on the other side of the pond with the Democratic Party. You still have people to this day taking Bernie Sanders seriously.
Yeah.
It's like you have John Cusack. John Cusack, Jesus, you were out with Arundhati Roy, hanging out with Snowden in a Russia hotel. I don't know what's going on with this dude, and yet he still will share Bernie Sanders tweets like that. Fucker's trustworthy. It's like when he showed you 5 times how he is, believe it. He will always take the knee for the Democratic Party. Talk is great. He's not an idiot. He's aware of the function he serves in that organization. He's aware of it. But he played, I don't know if he's in cognitive dissonance. But still, well, Bernie said this, or well, AOC this. I'm like, please accept it. Accept the fact that this idea of a progressive Democrat revolutionizing the Democratic Party, or somehow the Labor going back to whatever, is not going to happen.
No.
Not going to happen. So anyway, I just wanted to put
no, and Corbyn wouldn't be any good for Scotland anyway,
on that, because I've been hearing these people tweeting Bernie Sanders quotes to the DNC like it freaking means anything. I'm like, you should be irritated every time this guy plays this performance for you. Please. I get he's lovely, cool, fine, but hello. No. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. No, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me 3 times, I must be like, I want to be fooled. Fool me more. Anyway, sorry. So, Labor is not for Labor's not Labor. Labor's not for Labor. And the Democrats aren't democratic, so we have
Scotland
that in common. So go ahead, please continue. So,
but Scotland knows that. Labour has been dead in Scotland since the vow, shortly after the right before the independence vote, like days or a week before the independence vote, they trotted out Gordon Brown to make all these promises about kind of devolution, essentially saying that Scotland,
I didn't even know he was still alive.
Yeah, well, Scotland was going to be given all these powers, and basically we didn't need to vote for independence because we were going to have all these powers anyway. And that was enough to swing the vote so that the referendum was a no result. And then in the days following the referendum, they basically decided that actually, no, none of that was going to happen. And Gordon Brown just sort of disappeared from public life for a while so he couldn't answer any questions. It was like one of the most shocking betrayals, a lie, and a real interference in a democratic election that, in my opinion, basically invalidates the whole fucking thing. Huge betrayal. Scottish people never forgave them for that. They've never forgiven them for being a pro-austerity, pro-war party. The fact that Labour had a swing back in Scotland in this election does not mean that Scottish people are in huge numbers suddenly have faith in Labour again. That's just not the case. I think what it was mostly a protest vote against the SNP. People are absolutely sick of the SNP. That goes for both pro-independent supporters and unionists. And I think that was the turnout was extremely low. So a lot of, I think, SNP supporters quite simply just didn't vote. One thing that I found really, Hugh Keenan.
Sorry, Laura, this is for you. Laura, could you please explain?
Yeah, it's insanely corrupt.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read this out loud in case for people who aren't watching but are listening later. And if I ever get around to putting stuff on Spotify, oh my God. Laura, could you please explain? I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not a funny question. I'm going to get serious now. Laura, could you please explain how corrupt Scottish politics is and how the institutions work together to destroy Alex Salmond?
Yeah, so I think we're gonna see a lot more coming out about this in the next year. But essentially,
can you say who the Alex Salmond is, because a lot of people won't know. Right. I've heard the name, but I don't know the whole.
So the former head of the SNP, who was First Minister for God, I don't know how many years, a long time. He brought us from polling about something like. I can't remember what the numbers. It was very low percentage were in favor of independence anyway when he came in, and then took us to very close to actually getting our independence in the referendum. Got us the referendum, a lot of the sort of progressive policies that the SNP were popular for in the early days, that was under Salmond, and they still trot them out now as examples of how great they are. And it's like, well, yeah, but you haven't done anything in the last 10 years except sell off all our resources and privatize everything, and give yourself lots of money to set up think tanks and basically, yeah, the whole thing is insanely corrupt. I mean, it was corrupt before. Labour was insanely corrupt when they were in power in Scotland, and everybody just moaned about how corrupt they were all the time. And when you talk about corruption in Scotland, it's like, it's gangsters. They're gangsters all the way up. As gangsters, from local councillors to right at the very top. The Labour head in Glasgow is a heroin dealer. A lot of these guys, they get their money from dealing heroin. That's as blatant as the corruption is. And when my major hope when the SNP came in, for example, was that they were going to overhaul the homelessness system, because there was a bit of legislation that came out right at the start of the SNP's time in government in majority. It was like, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's like the Scotland Housing Act or something. It basically enshrines in law the right to housing. So if you present as homeless at your council, your local council, office for homelessness, they have to find you a place to stay that night, and they have to find a way of trying to get you into more permanent accommodation after that. And actually, it was a Labour policy. Labour came up with it, but the SNP brought it in and then boasted about it a lot, right? And I thought, right, okay, we've got this legal right to housing and we've got a homelessness system that is failing to house people constantly. And over the years, the councils, Glasgow City Council, has been taken to court numerous times. They've been investigated by the Scottish government for constantly failing to house people. And I was hopeful that basically when the SNP came in, not that this would be solved overnight, but that there would be a greater transparency and honesty about what the situation was, and the fact that this legislation hadn't been properly applied, and the fact that there isn't enough supply of social housing. And that the problem with that, because the outcome of each of these investigations has always been, we need to work on our relationships with social landlords. Now, there's no emphasis, there's no obligation of any kind being put on these social landlords. It's like, hey, can we have a bit more public housing? No. Okay, never mind. That's it. That's how
it's like, what does one have to be a social landlord? Is it just like trying to get people to be more moral and have lower rents? Or is there actually like a program where they get subsidized?
No, so Labour's brilliant idea back in the 90s was that instead of having council housing that was managed and run by the council, was that we would basically put all that housing in the control of housing associations, which were supposed to be local kind of housing management companies that were that answerable to the communities that they served. So there was supposed to be tenant participation. You'd have tenants sitting on the board. Like there would be kind of some kind of involvement in decision-making processes. And the idea was that these were supposed to be quite small local things that would manage housing in a certain area. Instead, what happened, which was basically always the intention, was that it was just a privatization, mass privatization of social housing. And it happened across Scotland, but in Glasgow it was successful. They did the stock transfer all in one go. They basically said, we're going to let these lovely social landlords, housing associations, manage all the housing stock. And it's been a disaster because they just want to make profit. So they're like, oh, well, we don't get much rent
income. It seems like, do you think that was kind of like the intention to kind of slow walk it a bit? So they thought, okay, if we directly privatize and do it and say and call it what it is, that'll cause a problem. But if we go through this in between or intermediary phase of social housing with these grassroots organizations, and then it just kind of, and then we end up with the privatization. Do you think it was that
yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Totally. I mean, I think
Okay.
profit drives everything. The idea that these
Mm.
ideas come from nowhere, that there isn't a guy at the top going, "Hey, we can make millions and millions of
And we'll
pounds
just
out of
we'll
this."
just call it
Like,
new public management. But what it
yeah.
really is fire sale prices of
Well, it's
public and
give us all control of all the.
yeah.
Mhm. But
Okay.
also, but also, you get public money.
Mm.
Because you get to say you're performing a public service for the good of it. So give us public funding for this. So this is what's happening in our
So they
neighborhood.
were
They're getting given.
so the dispossession, the conversion of council housing into private housing via the name social housing was also paid for with tax dollars.
It's
Well, that's
amazing.
nice.
We lose out.
I gotta get more devious. I need to get in on that money train.
But this is,
I'm gonna open an
yeah,
NGO
but
tomorrow.
this is Scotland. Everyone has to get paid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone has to get paid in Scotland. So there's always like all these extra people. And this is Sturgeon's government was all about this, like job creation and creating salaries and grants for her pals, basically. And then and that's how you control things. You know,
Mm.
you put all these people in position that are only there because you've fucking given them that position and allocated funds to them, and then you own them and you pull all the strings.
Mm.
But
This sounds a lot like local Mumbai politics, I have to say. It's interesting enough. And I knew, I mean, that's a
it is,
different
it is.
issue.
This is what
Because
Scotland
I
is
did a
like.
lot, because
It's
most
amazing.
of
Once
my
you start to
professional,
scratch
if
the
that's the word,
surface,
research,
yeah.
in terms of clientelism and kind of, this kind of institutional capture and all this rigmarole, as well as the criminalization of politics and the politics of politicization of crime and all this stuff. Because I remember thinking at first, it was like, I feel like I kept on when I was in India, the few municipalities I was studying, I kept on thinking back like Tammany Hall and like these kind of like, machine politics and all this. And I thought, this is weird. But apparently I don't have to go back that far. I can just go over to Scotland.
It's honestly, Tara, this
Oh.
like this campaign in the
Mm.
Wineford, it's been like living in an episode of The Wire. It is honestly like living in an episode of The Wire. My eyes
Mhm.
have been opened to like I always knew it was corrupt, right?
Mhm.
But there was this kind of disconnect between like how it actually connects to like, organized crime and like,
Mhm.
but it's like now I can see it all so clearly. Like it's all the steps and where the links in the chain are and how the like high
Mhm.
level legitimate, white
Mhm.
collar crime is actually connected to the horrible abusive drug
Mhm.
stuff at the bottom.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
like for one example, I'm all about housing. So there are probably other brilliant examples in all sorts of fields other than housing. For example, there's like all the drug stats that came out this week, and there's a lot of stuff around that being discussed. I'm not an expert in that, but obviously
Mhm.
the homeless situation isn't helping that. So we've got all these people
Mhm.
stuck in these hellhole hotels, and those are being exploited like crazy by drug dealers and by pimps,
Mhm.
who are basically trafficking girls in those hotels for sex. So
Of
on a very
course.
basic level, there you've got a market has been created. And I'm not saying that this virtuous cycle is all like happening, like consciously, like that
Mhm.
everybody is. It's just that everybody plays their part in the in
Mhm.
the in the system,
Mhm.
right? So you got all these people, this captive market for drugs in the hotels. There's hundreds of people. We're spending 500 a week on keeping homeless people in these hotels that you don't have a sink, you don't have access to somewhere to cook. You've got people wandering in and out of your room. There's no security. You've got guys trying to get you to have sex with them. You've got people trying to sell you drugs. You've got violence, people getting stabbed, people
Mhm.
dying regularly. I thought mostly of overdoses, but they actually only account for a
Mhm.
small amount of the drugs of the
Mhm.
deaths, sorry, in these hotels. So that
Mhm.
begs the question: what are people dying of
Mhm.
at such huge rates in these hotels? But
Mhm.
most of these hotels are owned by two families who are making millions, who've made millions off the homeless crisis in the last 10 years. 500 a week when you could pay their rent. It would be cheaper. It would be
Mhm.
hugely cheaper to get these people out of hotels and put them in a proper
Mhm.
flat and actually just pay their fucking rent for them. But
Mhm.
everything is backwards. Everything is backwards in this country. And there's always like five people that are getting paid salaries along the way that are making money out of it.
Mhm.
And it's all all allowed to happen. And so on our doorstep, we've got this £100 million, demolition and land grab that's going on. And to justify it, what do? They run down your scheme for years. They fail to make repairs. They have an allocation policy that is designed to make people feel like, oh, I hate those flats. They're full of asylum seekers and drug dealers. Nobody wants those people living here. They encourage racists in the community. They encourage drug dealing and crime in our community. And then you turn to the police and you say, oh, what about this? And it turns out the police are working with them. And they're working with Wheatley. And instead of chasing drug pushers, they're spying on tenants in the community that are worried about the demolition plans and the plans for regeneration. But this happens everywhere. It's like as soon as the council wants to sell a building in Glasgow, it goes on fire mysteriously. Like the connections between actual gangsters and the gangsters like Sturgeon that have been running the show, they're very clear. They're very direct. And
I didn't know that. I should have had to compare it. I should have been comparing what was going on in the periphery of Mumbai with Scotland, because this sounds like. And I remember when you mentioned that that you didn't, even though you knew these things went on, you didn't know how systemic it was or how enmeshed the different actors were. And I remember one of my friends, it was a contact, but I developed a friendship over the years because I've been working in the same municipality since my research master's. And he said, Tara, you have to accept, you're asking about boundaries. You think there's these cut lines, and there's not, between the party, between the bureaucracy, and between what they would call like the land mafia or the water mafia, cement mafia. That there's no like, you have, for the show, you have to play the blame game and the whatever, but behind the scenes it works quite well.
And the middle classes
and the real political battle is over who's going to be calling the shots from election to election, not anybody really wanting to change how the game is played. He's like, you should just accept this. And I was like, okay, I do, but I have to be able to prove it in like some crazy paper that's acceptable. But it was just funny. And once I thought, okay, I'm going to assume this is the case, and then everything that seemed to be really weird just kind of fell into place when I was trying to understand, okay, what's going on in this sector? What's going on with this land development thing? I'm like, oh, okay, well, now it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's hard to, because you want, and I don't know, you don't want to, I don't know, you just feel like, well, yeah, okay, yeah, there's corruption, yeah, there's some crime, yeah, there's some this and that, but like, really, the whole system is it's like this. And that's why, it's like, should even use the word corrupt when the exception is the rule. And you have to figure out, well, how is the exception structured? Anyway,
and
this sounds crazy. I mean, I knew that, I heard some stories, but I didn't realize it was so Peaky Blinders, although that wasn't in Scotland, was it?
Very similar. That could have been,
I'm like, all right.
There's there's this veneer of respectability as well that our politicians have. It's like in our neighborhood, for example. So we've got some dodgy stuff going on where there's pushers are basically, I think, being encouraged by the authorities and funded and allowed to get away with stuff in order to deliberately run down our scheme and prepare it for further demolitions in the future, which they will definitely come along and say, oh, this is a bad area because this is going on, or we have reason to believe anyway. So I believe that is their plan.
Well, Sturgeon is some sort of like mafia queen, then, you could say.
Well, that's not Sturgeon. So that is Wheatley, the Wheatley group. They are just gangsters. So it is not beyond the Wheatley group's ability to just pay guys to go in and set fire to buildings, for example. The way it's happening in the Wynford is a little bit less direct. So you can set up a group and then you can kind of like point them at another group, and it's all been a bit like that. But the thing is, like, in a community like this, so it'll be like, oh, well, this is horrible. You've got guys are targeting children, they're putting people at risk, they're targeting young girls. Someone should stand up to them, someone should put some social pressure on them. And people don't want to talk about it because They don't want to get labeled as a grass. They don't want to get firebombed or their kids get stabbed
I'm
in the
sorry,
street.
what's a grass? Is it like
Grass
a
would be like
rat? Like
yeah,
somebody who like
yeah, yeah,
rats somebody out? Okay.
yeah. So exactly. So that's the worst thing you can
Mm,
possibly be in a working class area in Glasgow. Nobody would call the police, even if you did something wrong. People don't generally call the police around here,
mhm,
unless it's just something really serious. But even then, you'll
mhm,
get shit for it. But it's the
mhm,
same with our politicians. So you've got
mhm,
guys that are councillors or MSPs, or they're hoping to be, in the Labour Party, for example.
mhm,
And they don't want to touch it. And the reason they don't want to touch it is because they don't want to, like, make waves, and they want to make
mhm,
sure that they get selected by their
mhm,
colleagues for candidate positions and all the rest of it. And it's like,
mhm,
it's the same fear. It's just that
mhm,
on our level, the fear in our community is, I don't want to get stabbed, and for them is, I don't want to lose my career. It's a little bit
yeah,
less urgent for them, but
yeah,
again, they all make the same decisions
mhm,
time and time again. They won't challenge the drugs in the same way that they won't challenge Wheatley, because yes, they
mhm,
can see that what they're doing is blatantly immoral and corrupt and wrong, but they can't challenge them without without that threatening their interests. And that would be like, well, you're not going to get selected if you're having to go at Wheatley all the time, when the guys that run your political party
mhm,
sit on the board of the
yeah,
Wheatley group.
yeah,
Obviously. So they're going, oh,
mhm,
well, I'll make this sacrifice now so that I can get into a position of power. And
yeah, and
now
then later
then
on,
I'll
then,
do stuff. And
yeah,
then I'll challenge all the corruption.
yeah,
Once I'm part of the
yeah,
system,
and
I'll
then you end
challenge
up
it.
being Bernie Sanders at 80 or something. Still having your it's like, not never having
Yeah.
done it.
But
No,
we
and
could, this is
I
the
can
thing,
understand
Hugh, like,
I can understand the flack. So, like, it's like also that, okay, if you don't wanna participate, fine, but we all know that there's certain things that you have to pretend not to know or to go along to
mhm.
get along. And yeah, this idea that it's not that if it's so the way things are, and if you end up being they'll probably just, even if you try to, and then you have the thing that can happen, um that if you're trying to go against the corruption, they'll bring corruption charges against you, to for a variety of things. So I can appreciate that the lone person. And also, I mean, whatever you have to believe that helps you not to have to risk these things, of course, people are going to be inclined to
Yeah.
believe.
Well, that's another thing.
And if
And
everyone around you is going along with it, you're like,
yeah,
well, you know,
they don't want to believe it. Yeah, they don't want to
yeah.
believe that it's going on because it's too ugly and it's too hard to deal with. So yeah, I think
Mhm,
there's a lot of that, a lot of denial.
mm.
I
Hugh,
just want to respond to Hugh if I
yeah,
can,
please do.
because yeah, just one other thing that we've kind of become aware of recently, that is really worrying, is that, like, homelessness and mental health and drug charities are being infiltrated by organized crime gangs, and that they're actually using these as both a cash cow and a way of recruiting vulnerable people to buy off them and to work for them. And we've a lot of
Mhm,
evidence of this. We've spoken to journalists who have seen it happening elsewhere as well. So
mhm,
you've got a real lack of safeguarding. It should be really, for example, a woman that runs a homelessness charity on the south side of Glasgow, her son went to prison a couple of weeks ago because he was
mhm,
caught with £50,000 worth of heroin. Now, he was living in the house with her. Now, she drives a £165,000 car. Her husband supposedly runs a landscaping firm, so maybe that's where the money comes from. But
mhm,
the idea that somebody whose son is clearly a high-level heroin dealer could still be running a charity that deals with vulnerable, homeless, and addicted people. Come on, people, like, no.
mhm.
Even if she was completely innocent of the fight, even if she had no idea her son
This
was
is
selling heroin,
so
no
this is, now
matter
I know
whose
what you mean by
son.
an episode of The Wire, and I don't know if it was The Wire,
Yeah,
but it was some other place that was like you actually would send people to go to like AA meetings and whatnot to try to get the
yeah,
people who obviously would be,
yeah, yeah.
susceptible to
They're
falling
like
off the wagon.
vultures
I don't know
circling.
if
But
that
the
is real.
sad thing
Yeah.
is, all you need is a nice, yeah. But all you need is a nice middle class face to work as the front for your for your,
Drug ring.
scheme. Who can make it look nice, who can make noises on Twitter, who can invite the professionals in, who can have the little sort of corporate events where they're like, oh, look what we're doing for the poor, impoverished, druggy people, that can't help themselves. We're here to save them. And you're lining your pockets and you're letting these guys recruit them for organized crime. So yeah, the situation is really, really dire, obviously, on the ground and politically. But for what Hugh is saying, like I think most people in Scotland are on the same page. We're sick of the SNP because they didn't deliver what we wanted, but we do have a majority for independence, and I think we are pretty clear what the arguments for that are. We want our own resources and control of our own resources so we can actually pay to solve some of these problems. And we could solve some of these problems. And there's a lot of just blatant incompetence that's going on that could be easily solved. Like actually easily. It's not a matter of not having the resources for it.
Oh, this is you. Yeah, we covered this though, because I clipped some of your tweets just in case I forgot. We covered this.
Indeed, like if we.
Yeah. Yeah. So just Laura saying the housing crisis is not being driven by immigration and refugees. It's the result of the privatization of council housing. Companies like Wheatley demolishing tens of thousands of public homes for profit, and the failure to build. This crisis is driven by profit. Yeah, we've been talking about this, and I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that I can't imagine why some of the problems that you just talked about in regards to homeless and other vulnerable populations and the NGOs that become fronts for nefarious activities, or money laundering is also a nefarious activity. And then when you have these kind of nice things where they'll pair up with somebody's, some philanthropist and a couple of researchers. And I was thinking the same thing, because when I was reading something again about just every once in a while there'll be a few articles about the homelessness crisis in American cities. And again, you find a lot of it. I haven't dug into it, but you find a lot of things. If you look at like the money that's been thrown at it, but then the money gets gobbled up by all these in-between organizations. And then there's always this constant thing, like it's so complicated and it's complex, and we have to have this study and that study, and we're going to follow along. And then you have the various buzzwords and the concepts change, and they care all this data, and then they're going to call them unhoused instead of homeless and whatever. And it's like, really, is it really difficult? Homeless people, it's right there in the name, need a place to stay. And then you also need to have, there could be alcoholism, drug issue, either what precipitated them ending up on the homeless, or what happened after they became homeless. Yeah, you need that, but it's not rocket science. And there's so many people, even people who I think they're doing a good thing. There's such a racket. There's no incentive to really solve this problem, because then all this in between stuff would go away. And who wants that? In addition to the people who are using it for really, for the really nefarious purposes. But even if you look at it and you realize that, the people, it's just the path to hell paved with good intentions, that what they're really doing is perpetuating the life of the organization, not actually addressing the homelessness issue. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure this is not just with homelessness or housing. I'm sure it's with a variety of things. We've had so much buildup of the NGOs and this and that. And then you have the fantastic researchers who are going to go in and they're going to study it, and they're going to study it a bit more, and they're going to study a bit more, and there's going to be more talk, and there's going to be talk. While people's lives just get churned up. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of parallels, but I didn't realize, and why would I? Because I haven't been in Scotland or remember that I didn't realize that it was such a Guy Ritchie movie. I didn't know.
It is. Yeah,
I'm guessing these characters are less attractive than some of his leading men, but I don't know. Not that there aren't attractive Scotsmen. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I didn't know that it was. Let's see. Hugh wants to get you in trouble. No. Let's see. Hugh, does Laura know the names of? Okay. I don't know if she's going to name the names, but
Does who owns Scotland's media?
Yeah. So does Laura know the names of those who own Scotland's media and also play a role in covering up Scottish corruption? She may need to DM you this information, Hugh. So, Laura,
I'm not. No, this is not my area of expertise. So maybe Hugh knows more about this than
yeah.
me.
So,
I mean,
so who owns
yeah,
the media?
obviously that's a thing.
Yeah.
Kind of sick of Scotland's media. It's been really hard for us as well in this campaign to like, trying to get a story out there is really difficult. Everybody's got their fucking if they're not SNP, like defending Sturgeon, or the Greens, like fucking National does, then it's Labour, and they only want to frame a story in a way that is gonna make Labour look like the good guys. So getting your message out the way you want is always kind of difficult. You just go with whoever who will help you kind of amplify it. But certainly at the moment in Scotland, we've got a real kind of there's a lot of pro-Labour journalists that are trying to kind of frame all this as a nationalism problem. Which
would the owners of the major media outlets in Scotland, I'm guessing they've probably become centralized as much as everybody else's has, or not, maybe not, but would they be that different from the people that try to control the English press? I mean, does Murdoch not care about
no,
Scotland,
they're largely unionist. Our only kind of pro-independence paper is the National, which is meh. it was very Sturgeonite for many years. Very very easy on the Greens. They have Owen Jones writes a bloody
oh dear
piece for them. I don't understand why he's.
That reminds me, I wanted to ask you,
especially because he came up to Glasgow and talked about how. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. If you want to finish about Owen, I just wanted to ask you, because I remember in a couple of your tweets, you there seems to be no love between you and the Scottish Greens, and I was wondering if you could let us know why. What's the issue? What's your
They're
beef
the
with
worst.
those nice Scottish Greens?
They're the worst. They're just absolute worst. For a start, they're not green. They're the absolute abysmal on the environment. That was one of the things I wanted to say about the recap from the election. Like the one really, really annoying thing that came out of the election was that the Greens were untouched. Their voter base doesn't care that they have been supporting neoliberal austerity policies for years, that they slashed our bloody housing budget, that they slashed our teaching budget, that they break their own promises on the environment constantly. But their middle-class voter base does not care. They will keep voting for them regardless. That seems to be what I took from the election.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't affect them. Because austerity doesn't affect them the same way as it affects working class people. And they vote based on vibes. They vote based on, like, I think they chime with my values.
Oh, they would love the DNC.
And your
then.
values
They'd be having a great time. They'd be having a great time in Chicago right now.
Very similar.
With hotties for Kamala and, joy and, woohoo.
But I get very angry because
there's twerking.
Yeah. But I'm Alpa, right? So I'm my sister, for example, is a conservationist. She works with seabirds. I am very concerned about the environment. But I'm a member of ALPA, and so I need to make the argument for why I think it's important to keep Scotland's only oil refinery open, and why I don't want to sell off all our oil and gas to these giant tycoons like the bloody Green Party do. And Nick actually got one of the heads of the Green Party to admit on Twitter that their interest is just getting rid of all the oil and gas, as opposed to actually figuring out a way to do a green transition, because it's just like it's an easy thing that they can do in the So I'm stuck in this position where basically, unless you say I want to end all oil and gas right now,
which is like a death wish,
then you obviously don't care about the environment. But I think that's absolute nonsense, because actually selling off or essentially gifting all our natural resources to these external companies is not going to help us to have a greener future and do the green transition thing. What we want is to have, and also it won't stop oil and gas. So the Greens might say they want an end to oil and gas, but is there a single Green politician who has said that they want to end the import of oil and gas? because until they say that, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Because what
And
they
also
want to do is
I
pull
wonder
our
if
oil.
yeah, I wonder if any of them know that that it's not just electricity that we need energy for. I really think that some of them aren't aware of this. That it's like, if you think about all the
Yeah.
energy that we need for our quote unquote industrial or modern society, whatever you want to call it, about 20% of that is electricity.
Mhm.
And so even if you had all electricity provided by renewables, which you can't, and also the idea that whereas wind and the sun are renewable, windmills and solar power panels are not.
Mhm.
And no one wants just like, but it's this
Yeah.
idea that you still have 80% of your energy needs. Where are you going to get that from? You're not getting it from the sun, not direct. I mean, you're not getting it from solar panels, and you're not getting it from windmills. And plus, if you like having power 24/7, that's not enough either.
But
But they
we're
just
but we're
love
on
this
track.
idea, and it's like
Yeah.
or they don't really realize that, like, plastics come from oil
Yeah.
and like all this stuff. And then, I mean, if they really, I think they should go and live someplace
Mhm.
without oil and gas, and they can have windmills and they can have solar panels,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that's all they can have. And they should go there for
But
a
I mean,
month or so, and then
I
they should
want an
report back
yeah,
about how we're going to scale
Mhm.
that up.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just like, and then they get mad at you. It's the same thing. It's like well, I guess I probably also get mad when people touch my ideological teddy bears and nighttime stories. But it's like, it's like people just want to shoot the messenger or smear the messenger. It's like, look, I wish that we could get all the power we need from the technology we have now when it comes from wind and solar, but we can't. So, and I'm also not going to tell countries that are,
Well, we're very
have
close to that
extremely
in
high
Scotland.
poverty rate, like, that to be like, oh, well, you guys don't get to, you got to leave that coal and gas in the ground, brother. It's like, what?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's very weird. It's very Malthusian death wish. I don't understand it. Well, I do understand it, but I don't see how it's green. They just go, and
Mhm.
it's this thing like you just say something's green, and all of a sudden you can't say anything about it because it's green, and green by
Mhm.
definition is good. It's like, well, no, I call it green
Mhm.
lighting. I don't know if I probably didn't coin that phrase, but I have a big green light, and I used to put it on people's tweets all the time before October 7th happened. I was like, "You're green light," and they get mad at me, like, oh, you just are a shill. I'm like, yeah, I'm a shill. Like, I wish I had that oil and gas money. And he's paying me. Ah! Anyway,
But I mean,
so
an end an end to oil and gas is a perfectly reasonable thing for us to be moving towards, and obviously Scotland has like brilliant natural resources, and we are on track to be able to create all our energy greenly. um, but in the meantime, they want us paying a premium, exporting our oil, and then paying extra to get it back refined, which
Mhm. Yeah.
is nuts. So we have all this oil, we're still using it. Let's keep our refinery and keep
Mhm.
those jobs, and let's keep our resources, and let's have control over our resources so that we
Mhm.
can then choose how that money gets invested. And then it's up to
Mhm.
us if we want to invest it in green technologies and green industries. It's not up to some bloody. Do you know what I mean? It's just stop
Mhm.
giving everything away, people. But this is like Nick says. This is them seeing independence on the horizon, and basically transnational capital, the UK or England, trying to strip us of all our assets before we get
Beforehand. Okay, so
there.
yeah, that would make sense. Like, okay, you want independence first, we're gonna get rid of everything. We're gonna get everything out of you that we can, and then once we're not interested
And the
anymore,
Greens will help
then
them.
we'll leave you like we left Afghanistan. So that
Yeah,
was funny. But it's like once it's not for work for us anymore, and then fine, then you can be independent.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
Greens will help them. So yeah, no, if it. But then when it comes to
Mm.
retrofitting, which the Greens said they were going to do, which is a really obvious way of helping the environment. Like, don't blow stuff up, don't build new all the time, retrofit old buildings. Uh,
Mm.
it's really fucking obvious,
Mhm.
and they won't do it.
Mhm.
They won't support it because then they'd have to challenge the Wheatley Group. And
So they had to
instead,
do more, and
they
then they
go
had,
along
and
to
doesn't it
housing
also
conferences, events.
take more work? I mean, it's easy just to be like to sell things off and to say, oh, we need to have, to be in love with windmills and solar panels, but to actually uh do what you need to do to have a more of your energy grid, to the extent that's even possible, because again, you don't get 24/7 hour power from renewable sources, especially, and so if people don't embrace nuclear, they're just really living in a fantasy world, um, based on the technology that we have now. If you really want to keep a lot of oil in the ground, then you need to embrace nuclear. But that's also been like, because of
Mm.
obviously bad things have happened, and people think they just think everything's a Chernobyl around the corner. But anyway, that's different. That's a different thing.
Yeah, I
But
don't
yeah,
know.
could you think that's it? That it's just easier. This kind of
Yeah.
kind of ladies
Why?
and guys who lunch type
Wh-
of politics is easier than actually having to build things.
Why would you do it? Why would you do it when? Well, if your voter base is going to keep supporting you regardless, why do all the hard work of actually standing up for working people or the environment?
Yeah.
I mean, they literally this last election has just proven that point for them. I think
Mm-hmm.
just keep going with the woke, identity politics stuff. Give
Mm-hmm.
off the right vibes, and it doesn't really matter what you do because it doesn't affect your
Mm-hmm.
voters are middle class people that are voting for you in order to signal that they have a certain set of values.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um,
Mm-hmm. They're the good guys.
and the left needs to stop letting them away with it. The left needs to
Mm-hmm.
stop pretending that this is a lovely
Mm-hmm.
social democratic party that cares about working people and asylum seekers and housing and the environment. It's maddening.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these people, like the careerism and the corruption
Mm-hmm.
extends to obviously our institutions, which are, basically crushed and destroyed and weakened anyway. But now you have a bunch of progressive graduates scrabbling for positions in the trade union movement or what have you,
Mm-hmm.
and then they become co-opted, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
want to rock the boat or upset their pals. Yeah, everybody's trying
Mm-hmm.
to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of having your cake and eating it too. So you want to be able to signal that you have the right values and you think the right way on things, but yet you also want to have, the nice career and
Yeah,
all these
and
things
it's
and to go along.
worse.
And I think we were
Look at
talking about this. It's a theme that came up. Was it yesterday? I can't even remember anymore. When Alexander McKay from the Marx, I always want to say Marx, Lenin, Engels. That's not right. Marx Engels Institute. And we're talking about cultural Marxism, and one of the things that Zuleika tweeted afterwards in reference to the show was that we need a divorce. There's certain things that we need to disabuse ourselves of, and certain people who we think are allies or that we think we can make into allies that we need to realize are not our allies. And I think that part of this is in places where the left has been so weakened, actual left, so class and capital, working class people, this type of, not this all this other, identity politics and bourgeois enlightenment bullshit, whatever. Um, that's been so weakened and demoralized, and so there's been this thing that we have to somehow, again, this thing, like, well, like the Democrats can be turned progressive, like there could be a progressive Democrat that could actually mean more than just talk, or to show like, oh, look, we listen, we're a big tent, so we'll listen to everybody, and then we're just going to keep on doing these neoliberal policies with just a nice, patina of color. Um, and to be willing to be like, better to be small in number, but principled and dedicated than to this current thing that gets us nowhere. It's just further
yeah,
liquidation. That the Green Party is not going to get us where we want to
yeah,
go. The
and you can
Labor
achieve
Party
a
maybe
lot with a
isn't
small
the
group
Labor
of people.
Party of 50 years ago. The Democrats were, I mean, you know, fine, FDR saved capitalism and did the New Deal that did allow for a flourishing, for a few decades of a growing middle class, primarily white, but whatever it was. You know, but that is a blip. That was a blip. And we need to accept it and get serious and be willing to say no to stuff that is so counter to what we want, even if it means hurting somebody's feelings. Or I know I realize it's easier said than done, um, but it just seems that this current thing that the quote unquote left has morphed into is also sick and can't really do much.
There's another good Nick-ism that he uses, which is that he says the left is dead and something else is wearing its skin.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the perfect way of putting it. You see all these women going like, oh, the left, oh, you're left-wing women, oh, you're trying to throw us to the wolves like with your leftiness. And it's like, no, like, well, what the mistake that the left made was that they decided that we were fascists, thus completely watering down I keep swearing, the definition of fascism, and also the whole concept of the United Front, which is supposed to be where we can have discussions, we can disagree with each other, but we can be civil and have discussions up to a certain point. But once you're one of these guys that actually thinks we should just go around and, kill people and control them and all the rest of it, no, we say no to fascism. We say no to Nazis. You are not part of the discourse. We all of us, including the slightly right-wing people, all together collectively say no to you because you want to basically kill people and make them less safe. And that was a perfect reasonable position for a long time. For in Belgium, for example, you're not allowed to be in Nazi party, or you're not supposed to be. They find ways around it. But one of the biggest parties got shut down because it was like there was a court case and they decided, no, you are Nazis. You're not allowed to be Nazis and be in government. That's not happening. Britain got a bit weird about all this around the time that the EDL started stomping around, and we all decided that it was very important to give airtime to Nazis and to listen to fascists and pay attention to them and all the rest of it.
Poor Greta. Greta got she became a victim of her own popularity, I think, and too wooed by the Bill Gateses and the Bill Clintonses and all this stuff. Yeah.
But now you have this situation that so a lot of these women were called fascists for years, and you're going, oh, you're fascist because you don't want men in women's spaces. And like that became common parlance. And now that some of those same women have turned around and gone, well, maybe I am a fascist. Yeah, if that's what a fascist is, maybe that's what I am. Maybe it's not so bad. So this whole idea of the United Front, you can't have a United Front if you're just going to call everyone who disagrees with your values, your social values, a fascist and a Nazi. That this is a mistake that was made by the left, obviously, and no one knows that better than us because we went through it. We do not need right-wing women to explain this to us.
It's like, you think we're the first people to confront this? Yeah, no, but also I think what's odd, and I don't know, it must be because we still live in
that it lost all meaning
because of capitalism. That since the task remains for any actual left to try to confront the core antagonisms of it, to how do you deal with the capital labor contradiction and the other ones that flow from that, that's why, because it doesn't matter how weak the left gets, and by left I mean like class and capital, working class left. It doesn't matter how weak that gets. It's still everybody, like communism is right around the corner and everybody's a communist. If there aren't actual communists, you'll just call anything you don't like communist. So gender ideology is communist, and the idea that white people are born with original race sin is communist, and then everything's communist. Like Foucault's a communist and Derrida's a communist, and everybody's a communist, anti-communists are communists, all communists. And it's like, and in one way, be like, okay, well, they wouldn't have this much, even if they're just spoofing, if they think they're just getting, using a convenient term that still has negative connotations. Although I don't know with the younger generations if this still works as much as it does with boomers and late Xers. but it's just it's almost like there's a haunting. It's almost like the people know that at a certain point this can't go on. I think about that quote from
Yeah.
Batman Returns or Batman Dark Knight when Selena Kyle says, like, "Did you all think you could live large forever and no one, like, it would never end? Like, when,
Yeah.
better batten down the hatches because
Yeah.
like, maybe there's kind of like there's like this collective ill ease because there's just this realization that it can't go on, like that there is a sickness, that there's the problems that the system is creating, that it can't push down the road that much anymore, to,
Yeah.
or down the road or to the other side of the road.
Yeah.
It's crazy
Which
to
has
me when
led
I
to this
started
whole thing
seeing
that I
that, like,
keep
this whole
hearing.
thing that with Trump,
Yeah.
again, to end where we started, this idea that Trump, whoever's running his campaign, is like trying to do the campaign for Mitt Romney when they're trying to paint Obama as a communist. It's like, really, everything you could go with, you're going to go with Kamala as a communist,
Yeah.
and they think this is going to work. I mean, it
Yeah.
might. I mean, God, who knows? Who knows?
But see,
But
this
it's
whole
like,
this
really?
whole thing.
So you could be a total corporatist capitalist and still be called a communist if it by the other corporatist capitalist.
Yeah. And it's,
and, and
I
then we
mean,
think,
this is
oh,
what
it's
this
so
whole thing has
beautiful.
been.
Go ahead.
This is what this whole thing has been for, right? So, like, I never thought of Posey Parker, for example, or people like that as being active agents in this. But I always felt like, or have felt for a long time, that this whole culture war is being used to undermine actual left-wing activities. Like, that is a huge function of it. It serves to obviously make a lot of money for big pharma and all the rest of it, but also it's been a great way for example, the SNP to purge all its left-wing and feminist activists, for the Greens to dismiss anybody that challenges their policies as, oh, just a bigot, so it's very useful in that sense.
Yeah, you just
And what you've
dismiss
got
it.
is a lot of women who found themselves politically homeless and who decided that the terms right and left no longer mean anything. And this is happening obviously a lot. So if you look at the Trump thing, for example, well, no, Trump isn't there yet, but if you look at the alt-right in America and the sort of stuff that they say, and you take, for example, what are they? The Boogaloo Boys or something. I read their manifesto, right? And if you actually took that side by side with most like kind of far left manifestos, not a huge amount of difference
No.
between them. So an end to foreign wars, less incarceration. There's a lot of stuff that, they want reindustrialization, they want investment in infrastructure. None of these things are being promised to them in any way by Trump.
No,
But in any way, okay.
No.
But these are all actually, these are things that are about the working class. So now the left has become the elitists who are more interested in identity politics and respectability than they are in actually improving the material conditions of working people. It's actually the right that is standing up for that. And so you've got all this confusion going on where it's like the right is kind of like the more working class, the left are the elitists, and while they've been building this up for ages. But then the one big difference, the major difference, obviously, between the right and the left is the ethnic stuff. The racism is the most important part of it. If there was a way of removing the racism from the right and only being left with all the nice stuff where they care about working class,
there's left racism, baby. You know that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what the left and the right are defined by. So instead of thinking, oh well, the left is Greens and progressive people in the SNP and trans rights,
the left might try to save you, but it's still a racist premise.
The left is still the left. There's just a lot of people calling themselves the left that just don't care about it.
I also wonder, though, I think they might be ready
Marxism,
to get rid of this whole thing, because you can have leftists and rightists, but I don't know where if you want to have a Marxist politics, I don't know if, and of course they didn't talk in those terms back then. Doesn't mean they're not meaningful now. But I think if you have a car, the left side of the car, the right side of the car have the same car. So you have a left side and a right side. Side of what?
Yeah.
And this is the thing, is that with liberalism, like classic liberalism, so not like liberal like woohoo anything goes, although it's kind of gone into that libertinism, is that you have, like with the Republicans, it's so weird with the common sense usage, but the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are both liberal, in terms of their in terms of the like the political economy, in terms of like classic liberal. But it's on these social issues, what we now call cultural issues, where there's some difference. And that's where they get the money from their voter base. That's how they mobilize the people. On one side, it's abortion, it's guns, it's family values, etc., etc. Also various racist dog whistles. And on the other side, you have some of that too, but it's more condescension with their racism, though there could be other aspects of it. And then it's like, oh no, they're going to take away your abortion rights. They're going to make everybody have a gun. They're going to get rid of all environmental protection if you don't vote for us and give us money. But yet, just like we know that time and time again, and I'll show this issue, that there's a perverse incentive in this current left-right system against actually resolving policies. It's better to keep them open. And here's just one example of that, because they're going to be talking a lot about the right to choose, women's right to choose. We'll just forget for a moment they think that a woman is whoever says they are. But since 1977, Democrats have had several opportunities to codify abortion at the national level, and they have not done it. And one of the reasons why they haven't done it is very cynical, is because it helps get them votes. And it's good for campaign contributions and good for getting out the vote. And it's kind of ironic, really, that one of the things that Trump can tout is that he put the 3 conservative justices on the court, and they overturned Roe versus Wade. But actually, in terms of politically, that was bad, because then they can't really run on it anymore. Because now it's not at the national level, because now it's returned to the states. And also, what no one wants to admit is that Roe versus Wade was a terrible case. But it also shows that the court, of course, is going to deal with legal precedents, but they're also going to stick their finger up in the air and see which way the cultural winds are blowing. But the idea that the idea that oh, we'll just keep this in the courts and that we're not going to have to ever deal with it in the deliberative wing. They've had decades to do it, and they haven't. But they won't. But this all gets memory hold. No, they were always, did everything they could to protect the women's reproductive rights, and it was Trump who just got rid of it. I mean, it's such a game, and I don't know why we play it. I guess a lot of us don't, because about 55. I think the biggest voting bloc in the states are those who don't vote. I think it's probably about a lot of people don't vote who could vote, but there's still like half the adult population still does vote for this stuff. I don't know. And I don't know. I'll probably end up voting for Jill Stein, even though she thinks trans women are women, or says she does. I'm guessing she knows this isn't true. But even though the Greens' policy on trans is whacked, some crazy person wrote that. Still, and also it doesn't mean anything, because I'm registered to vote in Oregon, and Oregon always nationally, you never know, but at the national election has been blue for a long time because of the urban vote. The governor can go back and forth, and so every once in a while they'll get a senator who's a Republican, but for the longest time now it's always gone. So my vote for Jill Stein, even though their trans policy is crazy, or their gender ideology, their gender ID, everyone should be free to be who they are and love what they like, blah 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 blah. It's like who's not saying that? You can't be what you're literally not, okay?
I hate personal freedom.
Anyway, anything you want to say before we wrap up, Laura, about anything?
Fuck Posey Parker.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, she's really trying.
That's about how coherent I am at the moment about the whole thing.
Trying to get your slide here. I hope I have it. Oh yeah, I do. Okay. So everyone who's watching or watches later, you can go and follow Laura Jones, former Decent IS, because she used to be decent before she had these crazy ideas that women are women. But at former Decent IS, and IS is capitalized. That's on her Twitter handle. And yeah, she posts regularly about the work she's doing with how in terms of housing and homelessness and Scottish politics and whatnot. Thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate your time, and we're gonna have Laura back because she's gonna tell us about how her and Nick Dury and some other people were pushed out of an organization, a housing organization, because of their position that men aren't women and women aren't men. So we got to hear about that. We got to hear about the purge. We got to hear about how you went from being decent
Well,
to
or
being
was it? Or was it?
permanently decent.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
thank you.
thank you so much,
No, thank
Tara.
you.
It's
I'm
always a
always,
pleasure.
I mean, really, yeah. I mean, I like you.
I
But
like you.
no,
Come to
I do.
Scotland.
Oh my god, I'm telling you, even now with the crime and all that, I'm like, I want to go. Oh,
It's
before you go,
great. Oh no, it is lovely. We're
before
not
we
all
go,
heroin dealers and
well, I'm not. I can run with the bad boys. I don't want to. I don't want. I got 3 kids, but they're. Got to keep them out of. I don't want them to become drug mules or anything. But let's see. We have actually before you go, we do have a few comments. We have a few comments. Can we go through the comments before you leave? Do you have a few minutes?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
totally.
let's see. Hugh Keenan. The movements spoken of here and by Alexander mean nothing to Scots. We are not political. Well, what about Wallace? Sorry.
Mm.
We
Mm.
want. We're not political people. We just want to get paid and be left alone. I'm not from Scotland, so I'll let
I
you.
think, yeah, no, I
I
think
think
there's some
he
truth
is,
to that.
or
Like,
he's presenting
certainly,
himself as being a
well,
Scottish.
when we were chapping, mhm. When we were chapping doors during the election campaign, like that was the main thing that came across was like uh apathy and like rage at the political system. Most of it directed at the SNP, but also just generally like people are fed up. They want the NHS to not be in collapse. They want there to be homes. They want to feel like the city's getting looked after a bit, and they just don't. And yeah, no, I think in general people are pretty disillusioned with all the identity politics and don't see themselves as on one side or another of this big kind of battle between good and evil. They're just more kind of
Ooh, it's the doggy.
yeah,
So you have to go out.
sick of the gangsters and the corruption and not hugely hopeful. Charlie,
Yeah.
she's
And
just
this is just
annoying.
look a smoker to the gallows woman. Okay, yeah.
Oh
George M. Preach.
yeah.
So I don't know that we'll both take that. We're both preaching, George. I'll give it to you since you're the guest. Preach, Laura, preach. Okay.
Oh dear. Yes,
uh,
you have.
Hugh Keenan. In the US, you have more freedoms to lose. Here, we're free to retreat into self serving indulgences and vices. Well,
You need to have a
we have
vice.
lots of self
You have
serving
to have a vice
indulgences
to
and
get through.
vices in the States as well. Yeah. Have you seen our portions? You can have a burger where the bun is chicken breasts. Anyway, all of it deep fried and battered. Anyway.
I know. See, I read self-serving indulgences, and I just got hungry as well. I think we're
I
on the
know, it's
same.
like,
We're on the same wavelength.
let's see. Snow Himbo, Terry, your laugh is entirely too contagious. Well, thank you. And I hope not in a bad way like Kamala. That's why I have to be careful. I can't say much about Kamala's laugh because I'll also be like, but no, although I don't break out into laughter like if I don't have any idea what I'm saying and I'm very confused. Like if someone's asking me a trade question, I'd be like, oh, but who knows? I might. But thank you, Snow Himbo. I like it's always nice to get a positive comment, especially with the types of topics and questions we tend to talk about on this show. It's nice if to get it. Penguin blue waving tear. Thank you, ladies. Penguin blue waving tear. Okay. I guess that must mean something to you. He's a penguin blue waving tear. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you, Hugh.
So let's see. I said contagious, not worse than oh, you're trying to make me laugh more, Snow Himbo. Come on the show, baby. We'll laugh. We'll just have an hour of laughter, right? We'll be the real joy, not the fake joy at the DNC. Those crazy genocide denier crazy people. But we'll have serious joy. Even not don't need drugs to do it. Not that I'm against, people who keep it in. I'm not a prude. I would say no to the hard stuff. Um, Kamala laugh is creepy. This is true. Okay, now we're done. All right, Laura, thank you very much. Okay. It's an emoji. Well, thank you. I
Thank
knew
you
that.
very
But
much.
if I'm not an AI program, I'm not an AI image program where you can give me like the word prompts and then my mind just puts together. I mean, if you want to like warn me ahead of time that these are what your comments are going to be like, then I'll be like, okay, I have to take his words and then make a picture of it like I'm an AI prompt or AI prompt machine. Hugh, I don't know Hugh, but we give each other crap lovingly. All right. Okay, thank you. See you next time. I look forward to having you back on where we can talk more about the what's going on between the GC thing, unless it gets too crazy, because that popped off a bit and I haven't been following it. But I did catch a bit of not J.K. Rowling, but Kelly J. Keane with her crown and talking. I caught a little bit of it. I was like, she's feeling it. We'll see how far it goes. I'm kind of curious how what will
She's
happen if what will happen if
acting a bit.
when the gender stuff dies down, God willing, goddess
She,
willing, whatever. I wonder what she will do. She'll just kind of fade back into her.
I think she's behaving a little bit erratically, and I think we can maybe expect a bit of a crash soon, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I wonder too. It's just like, but it's almost kind of like, but it's all in a way you're like, well, all right. If this is the hill you want to die on, if you want to,
Well, maybe she's just high on her own power, but we'll see.
that could be. We'll see. We'll see if because
She's
now
spending it on
she's
something.
both the queen. She's the queen. She's the queen of something, and she's also the community leader, community spokesperson for women, which is cool. All right. See you next time, Laura. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Tara. Keep up the good work.
Oh yeah, woohoo! You too. See you, and we want to get Nick back on. Nick and the lovely Eleanor. They were a kick in the pants. We'll get them back on. All right. See you. Bye.
Yeah.
All right. So, 2 hours and 12 minutes. So that was the lovely Laura Jones, and this has been the Morbid Symptoms News. I'm going to try to do a stream, weekdays on the morbid symptoms that catch my eye, whether in terms of denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and occasionally acceptance. Every once in a while, there's an example of acceptance. Somebody who seems to have accepted the situation that we're in, and is not wallowing in despair. So not in depression, but just like, okay, here's the situation is, and let's get down to business. Building something different out of what we have. So please do join when you can. Keep a lookout for that. Please do like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. For those of you who like my laugh or what I'm trying to do here, and the people that I'm collaborating with, if you want to become a Patreon or become a paid subscriber to what's it called, the Substack. I also try to put an article out once a week there. Please do. That's great, because my plan, I would like to do this full time, and to have this be my regular job, the Morbid Symptoms Media and Morbid Symptoms News and Report, and the podcast, and also the articles. So if you would like to participate in that in any way that you can, I would very, very much appreciative. If anybody has a morbid symptom they think we should talk about on the show, or like to join the show to talk about, please let me know. I'm totally open to that. I'm always happy to have somebody on the screen and on the show with me to interact with, so I don't feel like I'm giving some sort of weird, what would you call it, hostage video, or like I'm the Martian. What was it? What's his name? Anyway, the actor, when you're just alone, you're just giving like, video reports, even though you think that maybe going out to nowhere. So I'm always happy to have a co-host, guest, etc. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so I should say goodnight. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow around 8 p.m. UK time, which is what, 3 p.m. US time, for another Morbid Symptoms news and report. Take care, everyone.